Sing me a song of a lass that is gone, say could that lass be I? Mary of soul, she sailed on a day over the sea to sky.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone. My name is Virginia, and on behalf of the WallByrd team, I would like to welcome you back to our production of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I want to thank everyone for their support and their great suggestions as we've continued experimenting and exploring what theater looks like in a digital space. In keeping with the theme of experimentation, this week we want to divide the chapter up into two parts. So tonight we're going to show you part 1 of chapter 6, and we will continue part 2 next Sunday. We also want to let parents know that we have expanded our educational offerings online. We now have worksheets as well as games and creative activities for young artists so they can more completely explore the possibilities of the story and not just digitally explore them. I also want to take a moment to thank everybody for their continual support, for the shares, the donations, and most importantly, the comments and suggestions. We really appreciate the feedback, and we look forward to hearing more from you as we continue on the road to see what we can do with creating a digital platform for live theater. Thank you so much, and enjoy the show.
WallByrd Theater presents a call-time production of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Chapter 6, Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two, she stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery with a round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about, and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The Fish-Footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, and this he handed over to the other.
For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet.
The Frog-Footman repeated in the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little.
From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet.
They both bowed low, and they got their curls entangled together so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their hearing her. And when she next peeped out, the Fish-Footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked.
There's no sort of use in knocking, and that for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are. Secondly, because they're making such a no one could possibly hear you.
And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or kettle had been broken to pieces.
Please then, how am I to get in?
There might be some sense in your knocking if we had the door between us. For instance, if you are inside, you might knock and I can let you out, you know?
He was looking up into the sky all the time he was speaking, and this Alice thought decidedly uncivil.
But perhaps he can't help it. His eyes are so very near the top of his head, but at any rate, he might answer questions. How am I to get in?
I shall sit here till tomorrow.
At this moment, the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out straight at the footman's head. It jumped the trees behind him.
Or next day, maybe.
The footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened.
How am I to get in?
Are you to get in at all? That's the first question, you know.
It was, no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so.
It's really dreadful the way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy.
The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark, with variations.
I shall sit here, on and off, for days and days.
But what am I to do?
Anything you like.
There's no use in talking to him. He's perfectly idiotic.
And she opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup.
Too much pepper in that soup.
Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only things in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat, which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear.
Please, would you tell me?
Said Alice a little timidly, for she was not quite sure for her to speak first.
Why your cat grins like that?
It's a Cheshire cat, and that's why. A pig!
She said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice quite jumped, but she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby and not to her, so she took courage and went on again.
I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know cats could grin.
They all can, and most do.
I don't know of any that do.
You don't know much, and that's a fact.
Alice did not like at all the tone of this remark, and thought it would be as well to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of sauce. Took no notice of them, even when they hit her. The baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not.
Oh, please, watch what you're doing.
Cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror.
If everyone minded their own business, the world would go round a deal faster than it does.
Which would not be an advantage,
Said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity of showing off a little of her knowledge.
Just think what work it would make of the night and day. You see, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn round on its axis.
Oh, talking of axes, chop off her head.
To see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busily stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening, so she went on again.
24 hours, I think, or is it 12?
Don't bother me. I could never abide figures.
And with that, she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby to it as she did so, and giving it a violent shake at the end of every line.
Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases. Wah, wah, wah. Speak roughly to your boy. Wah, wah, wah. He does it to annoy.
While the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words.
I speak severely to my boy, I beat him when he sneezes, for he can thoroughly enjoy the pepper when he pleases. Wah, wah, wah. I beat my little boy. Wah, wah, wah. The pepper he enjoys.
Here. You can nurse it a bit, if you like. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen.
She flung the baby at Alice as she spoke and hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went out, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature and held out its arms and legs in all directions. The poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether, for the first minute or two, it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made out the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up into sort of a knot, and then to keep tight hold of its right ear and left foot so as to prevent its undoing itself, she carried it out into the open air.